Hi there, Teresa here. Welcome to my class and my video about Maui and Lahaina. So I'm super excited to get to talk about some of this. I haven't done a video in quite some time, and I'm excited to get to talk about some of this, so thank you for joining me. There's been quite a few events that have led up to this since about mid-July. So I'm going to be covering some of the history of what happened here, going all the way back to the times of Lemuria, all the way up to when things start to rebuild 2 years from now. All of it's really, really exciting stuff, and I'm excited to get to share it with you. It's been a long time since I've done some video work, so welcome. So what I saw, and it's been quite a bit. I'll let you know. There's only a few of us on the planet that are authorized. We've been put through a number of tests to be able to deliver some of these messages. But as with any messages, take what resonates and leave the rest. And that's always been my motto for things and discernment's been a big piece of 2023 as well. And it continues to be even in the end of September as we're about to reach October. It's all really, really exciting stuff. So anyway, if you're here, it's because you likely saw one of my posts or listings about what's happened in Maui and all the details. And when Spirit mentioned, hey, it's a good idea to go ahead and have a class about this to get into some of the details because there's so few that can see some of this, I said, oh, okay, this will be a lot of fun. As what normally comes from Spirit, everybody that I talked to was like, hey, we really want this as a recording. We can't make it live. So I was like, oh, okay, no worries. So that usually when stuff like that happens, there's some sort of guidance that's happening from the people in terms of what they're needing. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this recording. So, but like I mentioned, there were a number of events that came into this. So basically, if you know about the times of Lemuria, Lemuria was a civilization that was perfect on the planet. It didn't have any infiltration of evil whatsoever. Back in 2018, I had talked about the history of how certain energies showed up here on the planet, and how they entered the solar system, how they entered and destroyed Mars, and then how we petitioned to have them be able to be housed here, knowing that they had the potential to not stay light-filled, and all the beings that because basically there was no contact with evil or darkness in any way, shape, or form in this portion of the universe. And there were things from outside of it that had arrived. Now, all of that ties into why there were fires on Maui. Because, so during the times of Lemuria, when these beings had come to the area and had not done anything but been destructive in other portions of the universe and broke sacred contracts, that's when the things that you start to see, like certain foundations fail, certain evils starting to occur in terms of monetary systems, and at some point I can get into a video about the history of Lemuria and what it was like with all the perfect civilizations that were here prior to that, because at that point in time there was no war, everybody ate perfectly, it was just everything was in divine order, and in a higher dimension. Now, when Lemuria fell, which was not the original blueprint for the planet, for that civilization, but ended up happening, there were a number of beings that made promises to be able to work on the area of the planet and the solar system to make sure that it came back into a balance of light. And that is where we are at now, and we're almost done with it. So I'll get a little bit more into the history of that as well, so that you can see where it is that we're going. Now, back during the times of Lemuria, before things fell, the waters were pristine and perfect and glistening, and communication was perfect, and people looked beautiful and wore like their best clothing. Like it was just pristine, and that's how it is when you're in the higher dimensions. And so the sorts of things that you see in heaven. Now, what happened outside of that, when Lemuria fell, and Hawaii was part of that, some of it ended up becoming underwater. What a lot of people don't realize is that, and people here know it, but people outside of Hawaii still don't always recognize that the different tips of the islands are basically tips of like one major mountain, so everything used to be just one, and that's why they're still unified energetically, but also have their own energies, in terms of like when you visit different mountaintops, they all have different energies. So for the most part, when it came to that, I'm trying to remember the details exactly of it, but everything was pristine, and you had these crystalline buildings, and everything was really, really beautiful. It was a matriarchal society, where it's the same divine blueprint where the masculine would hold space for the feminine, so that she could do her thing and create. It was never the job of the masculine to be destructive. That was a miscreation, which is now being eradicated on the planet, which is exciting. But Maui, at the end of it, had kind of not necessarily been chosen, not necessarily cursed, but was the epicenter of the evil vibrations ever since the fall of Lemuria. There used to be a portal that was connected to all of the islands, so that was connected to the lower realms that these folks came from, and it was sort of like their version of heaven, but in Hades. That 2 weeks prior to the Maui fires, an entire third of that realm collapsed. That means that everything within that existence ceased to be. And it's not the lowest levels of, what some call Hades or hell, but it was an entire third of it. It did not go back to God. Some people think, oh, well, there's reincarnation, then souls go back to God when they're done, or if they've done enough bad, they go back to God. In some cases, things will be fully eradicated like dust across the multiverse. And so basically from there, all of the connections for the lower realms had a connection through Maui. And certain people, like for me, I never felt comfortable on the island. I would fly through, but it felt very flat to me, and it was something that didn't feel comfortable. But, to each their own. Who feel very comfortable there, that was a spot for them in terms of whatever their role was. For me, it was just to travel through. And for a short period of time, and that was part of the reason why. And ever since Lemuria had fallen, I didn't go back, because I was there when it fell and had other jobs and moved all the scrolls, which are written about on Kauai, by the way, to Atlantis and later to Egypt, but that's a video for another story, or yes, that I'll talk about for the history in that series if you'd like to know. If you would, please get in touch. Or perhaps look for that video, depending on when you're watching this one. So after that, Maui ended up, when that was about 2 weeks prior to the 8th. This is the end of July. There were, what is it called? There was the entire third of hell collapsed, and that took everything with it. There were, believe it or not, there's evil things that have been incarnated here in physical form that were taken along with it, and it just ceased to exist. And at that point in time, you started to see things from the evil realm starting to move their way into the heavenly realms, because they wanted to change sides. And that isn't something a lot of us have talked about, but a lot of us were starting to see it in terms of, interesting. These things don't necessarily want to work with or be enslaved. And I've seen some of those decide that they wanted to move on because they had been enslaved for a very, very long time, but especially here in the earthly realm for close to 200,000 years. However, that's another topic for another time. But just to give you the history of it, I went with a friend of mine who I had known in another time, and she opened chant for, she's Hawaiian, and we chanted in Hawaiian to step onto certain properties that we were asked to go into a certain property to clear the portal that was no longer in use. So this was 2 weeks prior to the 8/8 event. And that's when that collapsed, we closed that. It didn't take very long to do. It no longer connected all of the islands, and it was all or to the lower realms. So Maui was then like encased, and that was the last one. So it was still housing some of the negative energy, and it really, really needed to be cleansed out. So, which has been fun. I'm just checking out my notes. So, but let's see what happened after that. And then that was 2 weeks prior we closed that out. Hang on just a second. I'm checking the history. Yeah, so it was 2 weeks prior, the third of hell collapsed. And then a week after that is when I went with my friend and we closed out the portal that was connecting everything. And that was that was very interesting to watch all of the interference that was happening right before that wasn't wanting that to happen. And then on Armageddon, on the 8/8 gateway, which is Lion's Portal, that is a portal that connects yearly on 8/8 to the Lion's Gate. The Lion's Gate, or it's called the Lion's Gate, connects to Sirius and connects back to God. And a lot of these energies from God connect through the suns. So one of the ones was connecting through to mainly to God. It brings in that blue ray of light. That's the will of God, Father God, protection energy clearing. That gateway has never been a fun gateway. So it's funny when I watch, like I've been reporting on that one for years, and to watch a lot of people just coat it over with honey and sugar and rainbows and unicorns. And I'm like, that's very funny because it's a very different energetic experience for the rest of us that are aware of what's actually going on in that gateway. Physically, it connects to the area of Iran. If that's something that you find important, a lot of these energetic gateways for the different rays of light are not publicly printed anywhere for protection reasons. We will have that information released in the future, though, when it is safer to do so. But that blue ray of light, when it comes through, will eradicate all evil and all darkness in its path because it realigns with the divine templates. So, which is part of why it can feel kind of bumpy. I think I've been told the next year's one will be a lot lighter. Like the subsequent ones will be easier. However, but for potentially different reasons. But the main thing that I've touched base on is that I had another mission I had to do on 8/8 that I was asked to do, and I had to go and do that on let me see, when was it? That was on 8/8, and I had to take a sacred item to a part of the island where the trail was actually closed, and the power lines were all down. And it was interesting because I had to tell the police officer, I'm like, listen, I'm here on official spiritual business. I have to do this. When do you guys like close this down or however? And they said, well, actually, there's no power on the lines. We'll go ahead and cross, like let you cross the lines. These power lines were a good 2 feet off the ground, like this thick, some of them, and the police escorted me to the trail where I had to go. And I was like, okay, well, this is definitely divinely orchestrated. So I took care of that. And when I came back, I could sense a lot had shifted. And it's a good thing that we had closed the portals. I could see future versions of myself checking in from from the future, and just really excited about some things that were kind of complete at that point. But as I was coming back, the fires were beginning to burn quite a lot in Lahaina. I could hear the voices of all the people, which was quite a lot, because you could hear all of them individually and all of them collectively. And that's when I knew, and I did not sleep that night at all. And the next morning, that's when I knew that it was the fourth seal of Armageddon had broken. And it was immediately after that I started getting the visions and the information of why, and being reminded of that and what the future of Lahaina and Maui would look like. And that was a couple of days after that. I received the information they mentioned, the councils of light mentioned, and they were pretty profound, because sometimes you can sense them checking in when big events happen on the planet. And one of the things that they had mentioned was around that, when they, what was it that they said, was, hang on just a second, because my train of thought just shifted. So yeah, on the 9th, that's when we knew that most of the fire was pretty much almost out. But that's when they mentioned I could see the entire future. That's also when they mentioned that there wouldn't be any building, and why. When you know what's going on and you start to watch some of the news, and you start to watch the governor, and you start to watch some of the other people in authority and how they're reacting, all the information is available for what they know, in terms of who they answer to, what they've done, and that sort of thing. We've got a couple more seals to go. I could see the future of like other fires, other water situations, more of an earthquake really is what's next. So Big Island had a big earthquake, but what was starting to happen all at the same time is we were having a major act of God, which, by the way, for those of you that are concerned, once the seal is opened in this area, we don't have another one opening here. We may have some minor effects of other things that we see, but nothing that's going to be that devastating for here. Always what's happening here is more in divine order. It's a higher vibrational reality as well. But I saw the entire future of Maui and how it was going to rebuild. So then, and that was quite a lot to process. I did not sleep well for a couple of days around some of the things that were happening, in terms of being able to watch and hear all the voices of the entire collective of what was happening there. And I'm trying to think of what else was happening within the days after that. But that's when God came through and started confirming. He said, listen, this is the fourth seal. This is this is the future of Maui, and mentioned this is why that portal closed. That portal that we asked you to close was so that the fires did not jump to the other islands. Maui was the only one. So it had been part of an agreement against its will, pretty much, to house evil there. It no longer does. And that doesn't happen there anymore. And it doesn't have any connections down to the lower realities that it used to. Those realities don't even exist anymore. But yeah, that's been part of the good news around it. Now, there were a number of agendas present. There were people that were attracted to it that had other agendas, like building it as a smart city. Like, there were close to 100, maybe 1,000 different agendas for what darker things wanted to have something to do with Lahaina. And they knew that they were out of time. And those darker agendas were wanting to use the darker energy present in that area to be able to do it. And that energy is gone. What has happened, and not to say that those agendas haven't still been talked about, but the darker elite know of ones that exist still, know that the energies that were used for attempting that are gone. But they also know that people don't know that the upper echelons have been removed or extinguished. They also work on the area of people not knowing that, some of the people that we talk to, like basically that these agendas can't roll out, period. I don't care how many meetings they have. I don't care any of that. None of that is able to happen. So that was an intense time. We've since I'm trying to think what else we've had happen since then. But that's when the full download came through in terms of what it was looking like. When I was looking at our governor and what he was mentioning, he said, and he said, we have to work together. If you could read the energy field, he was not comfortable saying that. That man had sold his soul. He had been promised a number of things, which is what happens with a lot of people on the darker side, is that they're sold. There's something that they want, they're not willing to work for it through like spiritual laws, through working for it, which is where you've truly, once you are rewarded, you're rewarded permanently. It's something that's carried with you lifetime to lifetime. So there's certain people that have been sold out, and our governor was one of them. And so he was promised a number of things. And so too were, other actors, people that were part of more elite systems. They know that they can't use those agendas, but they also know that other people don't. And it got to a point where I was watching the governor and he physically mentioned that he could not build. And it's because he's been told, and that the areas of darker powers had been told by the teams of light, you can't build your agendas here. It's just impossible to do so. The light was too high. The vibrations they were pulling off of was gone. That's my cat that's excited about some of these energies. But those sorts of situations were basically, you don't have to worry about any of the agendas. I can tell you from what I've talked to from God, from Jesus, from the visions of the future, none of those agendas will be around, and you can actually see it. You can hear Josh Green's thoughts if you can get into that sort of thing. Like, he was projecting some of it in terms of not that I was going in to read him, but the thoughts were present, and was receiving information from the masters in terms of him thinking to himself that he knows he can't build. They can't build. And I'll tell you why. And it's going to be really beautiful as to why. But he already knew none of the agendas. He was thinking in one of these particular interviews, he's not going to get anything that he sold his soul for. And it started to click for him, like, oh, wow, okay, everything we sold out for isn't coming through. And it was kind of a sad moment, but that's what you get. That's how it happens when you sell out. You're not getting what you promised, and it's just what it is, but God's promise is completely different. So these fires, there were fires that were man-made, there were fires that were natural disasters, there were fires that were acts of God, all of that. Now, what I noticed is that people couldn't tell the difference, and there were all of like 7 people that could tell which were which, and I'd reported on that. You could see some of it on the mainland as well. Just now, it's been almost 2 months later, and one of my aunties was telling me she has 2 pieces of farmland, and her farmland, those 2 areas that were burning, were man-made, and they've got proof of it. So it was interesting to receive proof of that just a couple weeks ago around that particular topic. So anyway, most of the fires won't continue. It has been interesting to watch that, since people are demanding mentally and energetically for the waters to be released, that it's happening in other parts of the world as well. So it's been so loud that waters have been released, certain dams have been released, and some people are like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And it's like, well, there's been such a loud response to water here that the people even here collectively have caused areas in other parts of the world for water and dams to break. And so it was just the energy had to go somewhere. The waters here will be released in a proper manner. It will happen in accordance with the will of God. It will happen in a very, you have to have understanding in history of terraforming, of like building planets, and there are beings that do that to understand what that is. Those people, and some of them don't know who they are, but they understand the natural flow of water. They do other things, but there's people that specifically build planets and strategize for where the water will be. It's like a painting in the way that they create. Those folks will come together, and the native peoples, they're tied, related to water protectors. Some of those people are terraformers, but not all of them. And those folks start to talk about that soon. We will see that the waters will be absolutely pristine and clear. So we're not going to see the waters being used for the wrong reasons. But they want to reiterate that these darker agendas have been seen for what they are. It has been interesting to watch the conspiracy theories because they were turned upside down so that people would believe conspiracies instead of actually believing, where I was watching a video going, no, he's actually telling you he's been told they can't build. And they've been told by the teams of light they can't build. Here's why. We're getting to that. So basically, Lahaina is going to be a major city of light and sovereignty. It is the first on the planet of its kind since the times of Lemuria. And we're talking, for some people, we're going close to like 200,000 years back. And this is like older than Atlantis, older than Egypt, all of those, back when the times were perfect. Some of you will have memories that are sparked up when you're watching this. The sorts of things that you will see are like, it's just crystalline. Everything is gorgeous and quartz, and there's a couple of different reasons why that isn't rebuilt yet. Some of those materials have not been created here or released for being able to build with those materials, because everything has to be within universal law and universal order, divine order, before those materials can be created or reused again here on the planet, or manifested here. And it has to do with, these buildings are alive, and they can't be used for evil or wrongdoing or any of those things. So that's the main reason why. We have to have enough of the light of the higher realms anchored, which is happening quickly. And I just made a post about that, and I'm filming this on the 28th of September for 2023, even if you're watching this in the future, and you can go back and you can see the post where Jesus was talking about how it's way easier to deliver. Oh, that's my dog. My friend's dog across the way does a lot of energy work, and he's wanting to say hello. He's great at clearing a lot of energy and letting people know that he's around. He's one of my favorite dogs. But anyway, we have to have enough of the higher frequencies here. The people will come together that are meant to have these memories awakened. And the interim will be some ecotourism, but what we will see is full sovereignty. The buildings will be alive. They can't be used for any kind of negative purposes whatsoever. So they won't be built until then. That's about 1.5 to 2 years from now, when certain councils of people will say, okay, we're building in for the higher dimensions for the first time since Lemuria. You're going to see some Lemurian elders, some like Terra builders, that sort of thing, people spiritually and otherwise, and all kinds of downloads that are coming in for people to come together and to build this so pristinely. It will be pristine. It's like nothing that we have here. And some people are really worried about the smart cities. Let them have their meetings. They're just monopolizing on the fact, like, some of the people that want to build that don't necessarily know that they're being used. Some do, or that the power that those folks are working off of is gone. So once you realize that, you'll know the agendas can't go through. It's kind of like a posturing that's happening in terms of, but it's like, you know, the scary costume. You've seen, you know, the scream faced enough times. For some people, it's like, oh, okay, we've seen that before. And it's coming to a point where more and more and more people are starting to recognize and see, okay. But back to the city and the pristineness of it, it'll be one of the first areas that just doesn't have any illness. We're going to have people from other like star systems that want to come in because they're excited to come see it. But of course, it's up to planet Earth whether or not we allow that. Eventually, we will. There will be people from all over the planet that will come because it's an anchoring of light. So when there has to be a balancing that happens due to the universal law of karma, balance, reciprocity, that sort of thing. So because it carries so much like evil vibration for so long, it has to go back to carrying some of the highest vibrations on the planet. And that's what it's going to get to do. So there'll be major healing centers, great places. Technology will be intertwined in a very, very healthy way with, you know, the houses and the people and all of the things. But I wish I could kind of download the image of these buildings that are just crystalline and houses that are crystalline, and the landscaping is stunning and all of the thinking is beautiful and the communication is pristine. It's going to be a major hub. It's other towns, other cities, other countries will have this across the planet eventually, but this is the first one of its kind since during the times of Lemuria. We didn't even have that during Atlantis. We didn't have that in Egypt. There were other things that were close to it, but the vibration of the planet was too low for that. So anyway, another one of my cats is saying hi. She just bumped the table. But basically the main message that many want to say is that, especially Jesus has been talking a whole lot lately, is that the light has already won. Again, the city must be built in the higher vibrations. Enough of the negativity that was on Maui has been burnt, but also the area has to settle, sort of like after a nuclear kind of situation, which is what had happened on Maui. It's a history of another time. We have to be living 100% within spiritual law, especially in that area. Hawaii is meant for that. Higher dimensional energies will be anchored there and on the planet, so that everything can run smoothly and be rebuilt properly. And I'm excited for people to start to get more of the downloads. I had a couple of friends tune in and get a small portion of details around what was going to happen. I had tuned in with the tree in Lahaina on the 9th, and it told me and a few other native elder friends of mine that it was going to rebuild. And now, as of, it's 7 weeks later, 7 weeks later, the tree is starting to show green buds. So it's neat to see, you know, things that, it's a lot of trust to deliver certain messages, and we have gone through a number of tests to be able to do that properly. So, but it's really exciting when you see proof of that sort of thing. So the tree's going to be just fine. Let me see. But there's going to be, when the time is just right, you're going to start to see some of these councils coming together. Keep holding space. Keep seeing the vision of the future of what you want, like, or to be shown what the higher dimensional realities for Lahaina and Maui will look like. Because although some of the tourism is slowed now, it's going to be a different kind of tourism that comes. And it's going to be absolutely amazing with different star systems coming to visit. They're excited because we're coming out of this period of 200,000 years where evil had come in and corrupted this portion of the universe. And now not only is it not messing with us, but it basically is eradicated. It's being eradicated. So by the time that it rebuilds, almost all of it will have been eradicated. We're seeing it happen very quickly. And so it's in different ways, but I'll talk about the details of that. But just know that the things and it can't reincarnate, it can't go live somewhere else. It just doesn't exist any longer, which is amazing in and of itself. It's fun to be privy to certain things and to know and discern when to get to share. So it's, kind of asking myself sometimes, how much do you want to know about that? All of this will be the results of things being perfect. It's almost going to be like heaven on earth. So you're going to see some people with a lot of like astrological placements at 28, 29 degrees Pisces. Those are people that birth heaven on earth. They'll have like sun, moon, rising in those placements. And that's when you're going to see, those are folks that'll be involved with making sure like the laws of the land, that sort of thing are in place. Everything, whether or not there's financial systems, how families are built, everything will be with the divine templates. That's why they can't rebuild. So they've been told to stand down for that reason. And there's a few people that know it. So it's just always interesting to me that, some of the light workers can be some of the, they don't always know it cognitively, but can kind of sense it. So, but that's okay. But let's see. I do ask if you choose to discuss this topic with others, to give credit for where the messages came from, if you don't mind, and keeping this video private, I would really, really appreciate that. So I think this may turn into like a series of other videos for other cosmic history about like what Lemuria was like in detail, because we are coming into the next golden age. And so there's been golden ages of Lemuria. And then the next golden ages were different because we went from Lemuria like to other areas with some of the people. And so although there were golden ages, they were of a lower frequency than Lemuria was. Although some of them coexisted for a little bit, and other golden ages, they were at a time that had some of the heavier frequencies here, and things that it intended to do evil until things fell even further. So, but yeah, I'll get into that history in another time. So be sure to watch for those videos as well. But the main issue, or the main situation here, there's a ton more light coming in. The cities will be more crystalline and perfect and divine order. And you won't see people having to work 3 jobs to make rent. None of that will be in existence. There won't be struggle, pain, any of the lower vibrational stuff. It'll be more love, sovereignty, personal power, things working in divine order. Because I say that and I wonder how many people understand what that looks like. Some people have an idea of perfection in heaven, and heaven is sometimes one of the higher realms, and sometimes it's one of the stargates that people travel through like Arcturus for certain spots before they're going back to where they're originating from until they incarnate again. But they're the realms of perfection. So basically, Lahaina will be the first city of perfection, sovereignty, and crystalline light. So I hope that's exciting for you. I wanted to explain some of the history of it. I'm going through some of my notes to see. But one of the things, like, we won't have like land grabs. There won't be like struggles for water. There's going to be more than enough. There's going to be, how we manifest will be different, because it's coming from a place of understanding that we could have anything and everything that we want, as long as because we're going to be operating within spiritual law, and nothing will be abused or used for the wrong reasons. So that's why we're having to wait about 1.5 to 2 years before that happens. There's going to be a tremendous amount of change in 2024 for the better. And by 2025, they're showing like in 2025, you will start to see, like on this timeline, you will start to see like some very, very exciting things around Lahaina. It has been devastating, some of the things that have happened there, but one of the distinct ways that you can tell it's an act of God certain things kind of don't make sense, but I will share two things. There was a house of God that did not burn. Otherwise, if it had been man-made, it would have been a different situation. And used, if it had been used for like the agendas that certain people talk about. But I'm trying to think the other thing that they were wanting to talk to about that. It must not be super important, but the waters, they keep talking about the waters will be free flowing, and waters carry like the information, and you will have more cognitive interaction with things like the whales and the dolphins, and we'll have more sacred communications with them, and the food will be perfect, and it's all the things. So it's a wonderful thing to see that for the first time the negative energy connection between all the islands is broken. It's like a spell was broken. And now it's an anchoring in of light, because even Jesus is talking about how wonderful things are for turning in, for like a bunch of light and Christ light coming to the planet in ways that he hadn't seen even in his time. So he's excited, and you'll see a lot of golden sunsets when he's celebrating that. So I hope you have receive this information well in terms of the history of things that are happening. It's, although it's been difficult to be watching some of the loss, the beauty of it is in the transformation of removing negativity into positivity, into love. So it becomes the very first city of light and sovereignty, and it becomes the leader for the rest of the planet in terms of that. So it'll take some designing and tweaking and things like that. Some of that is already in the higher realms. Some of that is actually also already been predicted. It is sitting in scrolls in the Sphinx. So because some of us knew, who had petitioned what was happening in Lemuria, knew what was going to happen in these times, which is exciting because I could look back from that position and see where we're at now. So we will not have any more evil on the planet. That's where we're coming from. So even the people that are here won't be able to use any negative energy for negative intentions, and will transform, or a number of other different things. So when we have this rebuilding, we won't have to worry about anything else being interrupted or interfered with. So anyway, it's beautiful to hold space for that. So thank you for watching, and thank you for listening. If you've got some questions, let me know. Bye.